Well, boys and girls, we are on a fine Tuesday. Not that fine because it hailed on me today. I was outside. But this might be one of those bumpy roads we talk about. We're going to see how this all works out because if you know Mr. Cypher, you know what he's about. He's authority. And, authority and Kincaid, I don't know. We got rocky relationship. But this is stirring the pot with Don Kincaid and my very special guest, Alex Cypher. Thank you so much for coming in, spending the time and talking to us, the fans, sir.
No problem. I appreciate you having me on this afternoon. I also appreciate you calling me your very special guest.
Hey, we try to, as much fun as I have out there, there's my first rule as a fan. Be respectful no matter who it is, how long they've been in, how long they haven't been in. It does not matter. If I'm a fan and I want to address one of you fine men and women, talented men and women, might I add, I always say, Mr., Ms., Mrs., whatever. I'm always respectful with you men and women. You gotta be as a fan. I don't like the rough language fans. I'm not down with that.
I'm okay with that. You can certainly refer to me as Mr. or Sir if you so please.
Absolutely. Because again, for you that are watching, hopefully it's just not my dad and his dog. If it is, I apologize, sir. That's on me. I do apologize.
You told me there was going to be a lot more than your dad and his dog watching, Don. I would hope there'd be a few more people out there. Maybe your dad, his dog, and audio problems. Okay, there we go. Maybe your dad, his dog, and another family member.
That would be fine. But I had to reel you in somehow because, it's Kincaid. I don't have a great relationship with everybody out there, but we have a lot of fun. That I will say. Now, for you boys and girls that don't know Mr. Cypher, we're trying to introduce, and that's what we do here. We introduce the new fans that might not know you, and the people that do know you, the fans that you're familiar with and such. We get to know you a little bit more on here. We pull back the curtain a little bit. We don't have to pull it all the way back. That's okay if you don't want to. It's okay if you do. Either way, we just have fun, talk wrestling, Mr. Cypher, and then we'll see where it goes. Because I would love to learn a lot about you. Now, I want to start with, you are, and I'm going to totally screw this up, so please correct me.
Sure.
You are the National Wrestling Alliance, Commissioner Wrestling. Just tell us the fans, because I'm just going to keep screwing it up.
Don, you started this by not even having notes to go off of.
For what?
At least knowing my organization's name. It's the National Pro Wrestling Athletic Commission.
I'll still never remember, and that's why I don't even write it down, because I still won't remember. I'm not that bright, Mr. Cypher. So you play a very big role, WMW, Western Mass Wrestling, and PVP, Pioneer Valley Pro Wrestling. And man, we love to talk character on this show. And I'm going to say, and it might not even be far-fetched from who really Mr. Cypher is. We love to talk character. You present a big authority figure. You're very stern. You're very strict. You say what you want. You make sure that we listen to you. And you have some very strict rules in your organization as a commissioner, if you will. Could you please take us fans on a ride? Is this really a character, or is it very far from the shoot, if you will, the real Alex Cypher?
Well, Don, due to the sensitive nature of some of the things that we'll be talking about today, there will be some things I may not be able to answer. I'd also like to start this conversation by letting everybody know that if you hear yelling or things breaking in the background, it's just children dying. It's not really that big a deal. I promise you that. So where this comes from is, I was in the wrestling business for quite some time, and unfortunately injuries robbed me from pursuing that to where I would have liked it to have gone. Point being is I still care very much about the sport of wrestling, and I was lucky enough to have someone reach out to me after a decade of me never reaching out to anyone, and that's probably why my career as an athlete didn't go where I wanted it to be. However, I was contacted from a party that was aware of how devoted and passionate I am about the business, and I care about the evolution of it as well. I care about where it goes from here. And unfortunately, we can't go to that place without making sure that things are done properly and correctly. And that's where a lot of the pushback from people come is they don't see me as someone who is trying to further elevate the sport. They see me as someone trying to take things away from them, much like what's going on in the country today with people feeling like they're having their freedoms taken away from them right now. That's the position that I'm normally put in.
Because we hate change. I'm seeing it every single day. I'm part of the essential people out there. I'm kind of fortunate because I get to make my car payments and such. So I'm kind of blessed to at least have a job continually running right now. But I'm out there every day. I try to stay as safe as possible. You know, I wash my hands, I wash my ass, make sure.
I would hope so.
Probably the other, yeah, you know.
Well, I've been to a
But
lot of wrestling shows. I'm not sure everyone believes, those same principles.
uh, not in that order too, because you might want to do the ass first and then the hands. But your figure, because people hate change, and what you do is like you said it perfectly. You take stuff away from us. Man, do we get heated? That is what I'm talking about when it comes to character. Man, you know how to push our buttons so bad. And I love that part of what you bring to both organizations of the WMW PvP. Because they're sister promotions, if you will, or brother promotions, if you will,
Right.
You are involved in man, you are involved in such a major storyline within both companies right now. And I've had the pleasure to see, that was my last show. Pretty much it was either that or I forget which one, but I want to say it was WM PvP. I get them so mixed up, sir.
It's all right.
Battle
It's been
lines.
okay.
Yeah, battle lines. You guys were culminating this storyline. And again, storylines I love, character I love, wrestling, all throw it all together. Amazing package. And you guys and girls make fantastic storylines. And you've been taking us on this crazy storyline of the WMW and PvP struggle. Now, I want to talk about, you were a wrestler. We're going to definitely dive into that because I found out a little bit down the road that you were. And there's a match that was supposed to happen on an X date because of what's going on. It's not, but I'm sure that it will be coming in the near future, hopefully, between yourself and Matthew James, the owner of WMW, in a cage match. I know I've rambled on a little bit, but I would like for you to take the fans on that journey. Why that storyline? Why are you so involved in it? And a cage match. What is going on with all of that?
That is it's a large question, because there is about 2 years worth of build up to what has come to this point. What you get when you come and what you're seeing at Pioneer Valley Pro in Western Mass is this is what happens when there's too many cooks in the kitchen and everyone has their hands in the pot, so to speak. There is a lot of great talent from the Western Mass area, so much so that there are people who are pushed to the back sometimes to make room for others, and they feel like that they haven't gotten their time in the spotlight. I get to deal with this quite often. And this isn't so much your regular story as you may be used to, as to really watching arguments behind what used to be business partners happen in real time in front of people. You're seeing my emotion happen as it's actually happening, because a lot of these things that pop up as far as the issues that you've seen in the past are in fact happening at that moment. And much like anyone who wants to do a good job, when these things happen, it does make me look bad. And I don't like to look bad, and I don't like to be perceived as someone who cannot perform their job well. And that's kind of the struggle that I've been going back and forth with myself and the person who I won't mention their name that I am in fact in these now legal ties with, as far as who is in proper ownership of these two wrestling companies. And the match that you are referring to is a um, what's the best way to put this? It is a fail safe in case things become even more difficult, as we were having 6 matches on that show. Um, Teams representing myself, as well as teams representing the other person. At the end of the night, person whose representative teams have won the most would then be in charge of both companies. However, the stipulation was put into place that if it ended in a draw, that it would be myself versus this other person in a steel cage match. Normally, I wouldn't put myself in such a uh, juvenile position, but there was other circumstances going on at that event where one of my close colleagues and friends was put into harm's way, and I did that for his sake. Why? Because I am someone who cares about the people around me, and I care about the wrestling industry as a whole. Again, I will point that out many times because for some reason it looks to folks as if I'm here to ruin everything and not push everything to the next level. I mean, I'm sure you've seen with the wrestling boom how many companies have popped up out of nowhere, and at this point, the commission needs a spokesperson to help regulate as much that is going on right now. So,
being that mouthpiece, if you will, the voice of reason, I guess, if you will, to try to
sure,
maybe
I love
gain
that
some,
voice of reason.
yeah, to gain order in said promotions. You come in, you take charge, like I said before. You use your words very eloquently, but you're telling us, the fans, that what we're seeing is actually done in real time. You guys kind of don't go over stuff, or maybe kind of talk a little bit. You get up like this right here. I don't write
Sure.
nothing down. I,
And
I love the
it's one
raw.
thing to talk to someone over the phone, and then you see them in person, and all of a sudden they've gone back on things that they originally agreed to because now they're face to face with you. So this is where things get tricky. And for anyone who has worked with a colleague that doesn't see things the same way as them, it can be very, very tricky, especially when there's finances involved and there people's jobs involved. So
uh, PvP. I'm gonna say right now, I've sprinkled independent wrestling growing up. But when I was a kid, that's when I was really introduced to the WWF stuff. When Ivan Putski, Tito Santana were champions going
okay,
against the Wild Samoans, and I went to go see them at 8 years old, 1978, with my dad. Bob Backlund versus Cowboy Bob Orton for the belt. I mean, those are that old school stuff, the NWA, even resurged now. Very old school. I get a lot of that feel from the PvP WMW. Now, my point being is, I was never like a hard fan of indie wrestling. And then all of a sudden, I kind of put the music to the side. Guitar player, did it a while. And I was like, I need something else. And I go, you know what? I dig wrestling. Why don't we check out a show? I started poking on Facebook, and I found PvP, took a ride by myself an hour away. And son of a bitch, Mr. Cypher, I am telling you, I was going to every single PvP show that they had to offer. I loved it, and it got me right to where I am now. I go to a lot of shows, but PvP is where it really started for me.
that's awesome.
You
I truly enjoy hearing that. That's great.
now, that feeling though, is that what brings you into PvP and WMW? Because WMW is like it's its own thing. It's its own entity, but there's some kind of tie-ins with the PvP and WMW. But when you're coming into PvP, do you like what they're bringing to the table so much, and that's why you're there? Or did you shop around to other promotions, or how did you end up in like the PvP situation?
It really has to do with lineage. I mean,
Okay.
you start in a new role, and immediately where you want to be is someplace familiar with people that you know. You're also, when you're new to to your position, as I was, considering that the commission was something that was always there in the background. And like I said, with this new wrestling boom, needing a spokesperson, all of this was new.
Mhm.
People weren't exactly going to allow, the substitute teacher to come in and start calling the
Mhm.
shot. So you'd imagine that with with the reputation that I've built, that it's become even harder to get in the door, as opposed to the person that no one knows, that
Mhm.
no one has a foregone conclusion as to how they're going to behave. People know what I'm going to bring when I come in. I do, unfortunately, for some individuals, represent change. Change for the better, though. There's
Mhm.
never a change to drive anything into the dirt. I'm here to help companies in any way that I can, run their events, tend to their talents, both physically as well as the production, advice. I'm there to offer uh, my years of experience and whatever it can do to help, as well as there as the authoritative figure, the commission, to help uh, run things the way they should be and make sure things um, are operating properly. The four pillars that I have to abide by to make sure that events run at the highest level are production, talent, safety, and discipline. So those four things, they can never not be the reason why I'm there. Everything else that I offer is because I'm a nice human being. However, I have tried recently to take a step back from the role as far as spokesperson for the commissioner, even though I am still there. I am now um, on my way to becoming the top manager in professional wrestling. Another route to success has presented itself to
Mhm.
me through the commission, actually, as I'm still working for the commission, as the athletes I do represent also represent the commission. But this
Okay.
is now the mask that I'm wearing.
Well, you feel like you don't want to tell us who maybe the said person you would be behind as a mouthpiece, as a manager. Just whisper it to me, and no one will ever know.
Oh, who I'm currently managing? Oh, there's a ton of athletes. I have no problem talking about my athletes. From
Okay.
Creative Pro, there's Francis Kip Stevens, now being referred to as Evil
Evil.
Stevens, and Evil Kip Stevens, and rightfully so. It's definitely a more suitable moniker for him. He's definitely someone who's not afraid to do what it takes to be successful. I can tell you that. Recently there's been people like New York's Chris Benet. There's been uh, ex MMA fighter Chuck O'Neill. There's, of course, my relationship with Big Bacon Brad Hollister and Sexy Jesus Hammer Tunis.
Mhm.
Um, and hopefully this list keeps growing. The more athletes that I represent is the better of a foothold that I have in the wrestling industry. The more people
And,
I represent, the more power, of course, will
mhm.
eventually come along with that.
Hey, and in wrestling, that's what you want. You want the gold. You want the power. You want to be able to have the control of your own destiny in wrestling because once you kind of lose control of your gimmick or character, if you will, you kind of you don't feel right. You got to find your oats about you and get back on that train and try to find what should I do? How do I get away from feeling like I'm kind of just running through the mill with this? And that's what we talk about here is evolution of character because you've already mentioned evolution of wrestling. I
Hmm.
feel as a fan that it kind of comes in years of chunks, you know, maybe a 5 year span. All of a sudden, things kind of changed. Promos, move sets, production, the way people dress, the way
Yeah.
they just speak and stuff. So this evolution of wrestling, again, you need to evolve with this. From commissioner, I want to talk about when you were a wrestler because that has got me so intrigued because
Sure.
I've seen pictures. I haven't seen footage and I'd really like to check some of that out. Um, could you talk about you've been in the game a little bit. You have a passion for wrestling and it's very evident from a distance as a fan. Um, talk to us about being a wrestler and you mentioned injury. We don't have to talk about that if you don't, but if you could maybe bring it up so we can kind of get a feel on what happened and then you had to transition to where you are now.
Um, you know, pre NPWAC, I'm an open book. I can talk about that stuff. I've got no problem talking about it. Um, so I guess the beginning. I started in October of 2002 at the Walter
Oh,
Kowalski School in uh, Massachusetts, along with the talented Slick Wagner Brown. I trained there for a bit over a year until the school itself closed down because the building was being torn down. And then from there, I transitioned for a few months over to Chaotic Wrestling. And that ends up coming full circle to Chaotic, even though I wasn't training there for very long. Reason being is I had a close friend of mine who, for quite some time, we discussed becoming a tag team together. And he lived very close to me. We found out about Kevin Landry's school, which was only about 35 minutes from us, where Chaotic was a lot further in that sense. And they
mhm.
also worked out a deal with my partner who was just starting at the time. So we found it in our best interest to go to Kevin Landry's school, where we were training with the likes of like Antonio Thomas, for one. And, Antonio Thomas, who's now Thomas Santel, I trained with for almost a decade, and he showed me. I've probably forgotten more stuff than I even remember at this point. He has shown me so much. But that's, pretty much the my training lineage. Sprinkle some Steve Bradley in there too, who was a great benefit in teaching myself and a few of us at Kevin's at the time the art of wrestling psychology. And actually, that's where my first, half dozen shows that I did were for the WFA and Steve Bradley. This was back in between like 2005 and 2007.
Okay.
It'd take me a while to get to the point of the first match because once I was ready, I tore my ACL. I actually tore my ACL the very first day of training at the Kevin Landry School in a bit of a tryout. Show us what you can do before we let you hurt all of our other trainees. And tackle, drop down, and tear your ACL. That was the drill that I practiced that day. So it took a year to come back from that, and then I started having regular matches, and I mean regular as far as like a regular basis goes. And then I
Mhm.
started tagging with my friend who I mentioned who was going to be training with me at the time. His name was Tony. We wrestled as a tag team called the Alumni Club,
Oh,
and we
nice.
wrestled as the Alumni Club for about 6 years.
Mhm.
Eventually,
Are
luck
you
caught Tony, and he
are you are you Alex Cypher through this whole cycle?
yeah. For the most part, I was. I started off as Oz from D Block. Yeah, we were prisoners. My first match, I was a prisoner, um, and funny thing is, it was I was very much into the show Oz on HBO at the time. It's a prison show, so we got a lot of our ideas for the gimmick that we would use from there. So I was Oz, he was Machine, who was this short Puerto Rican powerhouse. He actually looked like he could have been from jail. I didn't. I looked more like Jean-Claude Van Damme, trying to look like he's from jail in one of his movies. Um, so that eventually turned into the alumni club, and then that's when I started really wrestling as myself, Alex Cypher. That is my birth name. I was lucky enough to have a wrestling name right out of the womb. Maybe that was fate. Um, so we wrestled as the alumni club for about 5 or 6 years. Life caught up with Tony. That was kind of influenced by the fact that I really couldn't stay healthy. We had just done a 3-day tag team tournament in upstate New York for a company that's no longer around, called 2CW, one of our favorite places to work. Some of the best matches we ever had were there, and some of the best memories we've had while in wrestling were also while working for that company. But I tore my tricep that weekend. It actually shriveled up my arm in a match, and Marshall McNeil was our manager at the time, and I remember rolling over to the side and looking at him and going, I think my arm is broken. And meanwhile, match wasn't over yet. This was like middle of said match. So I tagged Tony in. Tony comes in. He's getting beaten around, and I gotta get up and save him. So, I jump up, and at the time I'm just like, clutching the back of my arm. I got no idea what's wrong. And meanwhile, I'm taking missile drop kicks, and, I'm taking all these moves from this tag team called All Money Is Legal, who were, New York regulars who were, really popular at the time. That was slowly the demise of the alumni club. And I didn't even mention what the alumni club was. We had the idea of being XFL players. So this was, obviously in this transition before the new XFL and after the old XFL. I mean, we had the full football gear, Under Armour, everything. I remember Romeo Roselli asking us if we were the Under Armour guys, if that was our gimmick one day, because we were, matching, head to toe, and we looked awesome. We really did. But after I came back from that injury, and Tony he didn't want to do it anymore. That was, a turning point for me, because I was like, how much do I want to do this? And really, there was never a question as to how much I wanted to do it. I always thought, I'm just going to do it. There wasn't ever are you going to? It's just, I'm doing it. So I did. And that was like starting from scratch again, because now I'm wrestling as myself without the alumni club name, which it's not like the alumni club name was really big, but it was doing enough to get us, booked on different events in different states. So now I start over again, but I got to start over in like the best way possible, because I had been wrestling for a company called EWA since pretty much I had started wrestling, and that was ran by Dr. Heresy, and it was a great locker room of guys. It had, people like Warbeard, Todd Hansen, Ivar from WWE. There's also Tommaso Ciampa was their champion for EWA for quite some time. It was, an awesome group of guys, besides, the ones that we're all already aware of, like, Antonio Thomas was there, and Frankie Arian was there, which is a name that isn't brought up enough. So, I mean, I was learning from, the best group of guys, and this was like 2011, and that's where I started really wrestling as a singles wrestler. In EWA, they would bring in like the best guys from all around, like Brian Fury. They'd bring in for spot, shows here and there. They'd bring in John Walters, and these guys were around in the older EWA days as well. I'm just speaking of like the 2011 and above. So, wrestled for EWA until 2013. Unfortunately, the building that we were regulars there became a Methodist church, so they transformed it from a wrestling and type of place into a church. That also may have been the foreseeable future for me. I had just not had it realized yet. Not turning into a church, but I mean, changing overall into something completely different, anyway. Yeah, I started, getting hurt a lot in about 2014, and I didn't know why. I started having all sorts of pain sensory issues, and I was having both arms go numb, like when I was driving, when I was sleeping, I'd wake up and literally like doing one of these because I couldn't feel, any circulation in my hands or my arms. And I still wrestled throughout all this. That's when I was wrestling for what PvP is now. This is when they were in their earlier PvP stages before PvP, but still run by at the time Justin Tunis. And eventually it all came to a head one day. I was actually eating a bowl of cereal, and I guess my neck was leaned over in a weird position, and I go to take a bite of my frosted mini wheats, and I got the worst darting pain in my stomach that I've ever experienced in my entire life, to the point where I'm sure most people already think that I'm a wimp, but I was rolling around on my bed feeling like a wimp because I was calling my wife to come assist me because of some weird pain that just it felt like someone had put their fist so like through my stomach, like through the flesh into my actual stomach. It was, I couldn't get up, I couldn't get out of the fetal position, I couldn't walk. From that moment on, I was bedridden for almost 3 months because no one knew what was wrong. It went from it is what there was just so many things that they had put me on, tested me for everything. I got ultrasounds, and I got x-rays, and I got MRIs done, and I had CAT scans done, and they put dye in my veins and took pictures, and I mean all these things. And I kept saying that I felt like it was neck related because when I would look down, the pain in my stomach would get worse. And I was told by 5 different doctors that that's an anomaly. That wouldn't. The only thing that would be causing that is something in your thoracic spine, but no one ever has any damage to the thoracic spine unless they're in some sort of accident. I was like, okay. So we just continued on with life for a couple of weeks, and to wrap this part up, because the whole injury process from me ending my wrestling career to coming back in a different role was almost 2 years of trial and error of trying to figure out, what was wrong with me. And after seeing a neurologist and 2 neck surgeons, I ended up having a series of neck and spine surgeries. I have 3 discs in my thoracic spine. Oh, what do you know? I was the anomaly. 3 discs in my thoracic spine no longer exist. They actually exploded. They exploded, and then my body, I guess, all the antibodies in my body destroyed whatever was remaining of those discs. And then they found that I had bulging discs in my neck that had pushed pieces of bone into my actual spinal column. And that's where the pain came from. Was I had dipped my neck down, and I guess the bone went into the spinal cord, and there's scarring there now. So even though I'm healthy and I've had all that fixed, there's scarring on the spinal cord, which my brain thinks that there's pain there, even though there's not, which just makes me really, really delicate. So, can I wrestle? Yes. Should I? No. Am I going to? No. I think through all of this, I've found that there is a place where what I'm capable of doing is much more suitable for. I think I have much more to offer wrestling in this role, and without some sort of dramatic injury, I don't think I would have ever gotten here. Now, starting over again is that was the hard one. Was a whole new crop of people involved in wrestling, and
Right.
now I know less people than the people that I don't know. Like there's more people I don't know than there is I do at this point, which is weird because I knew everybody from 2005 to 2014. Like I knew everybody. And now I felt like the unwelcomed kid again that just hanging around trying to sneak a handshake or a conversation with one of the wrestlers just to be like, cool, I met that guy. And it's hard gaining people's respect when you're looked at like that before they know that you've been around for quite some time.
Mm-hmm. Being in that position that you put yourself in for wrestling, again, the passion, you have to, and I'm assuming here, but I would think you have to be a fan of wrestling. You're turning on a TV. You're still watching current wrestling. I would imagine, right?
Sure am. It
Because
depresses
now,
me, but I sure am.
well, it's for a few things. Because obviously you're a fan of wrestling. We all are. But you get to keep your eye on the pulse of what's going on. May it be a bigger platform, or may it be like Impact Wrestling. Their roster is just filled with indie wrestlers. That's basically all it is. So you're able to keep your eye on the pulse, the ROH, the AEWs, and a lot of those men and women. Like we were Warbeard. Oh my God, Warbeard Hansen. Private Party, and and I always screw this up. EYFBO or EYFOB or Santana and Ortiz. I always forget their old name. Being a fan, you get to keep an eye on the pulse. Now, I would kind of, because you're very passionate, you know what's good. You've been in the game for a while. Do you have anybody when we come back? And I know, and I talk a wide spectrum, but do you have anybody in your radar that you would like to maybe my client, like the Big Bacon and such? Do you have anybody in your sights that you'd really like to manage?
Well, I mean, short answer is, of course. I mean, there's plenty of athletes I would like to manage. Now, this is one of those questions that becomes hard to talk about because of confidentiality reasons. One thing I can tell you, and I have learned this the hard way, putting the commission stuff aside, now you want to represent athletes. Well, how do you speak to these athletes? How do you approach them? Where do you? When do you? Those sort of things. Well, you would think that in person would be the way to talk to people about these things, especially when you have enough reach and you know enough people where you can actually go to places and not feel completely unwelcome there.
Mm-hmm.
But to bring in someone representing talent into an organization when they're not already representing talent in the organization is what has been told to me recently, not impossible, but you'd be more or less breaking new ground, meaning I very much want to put the people that I represent first. And I know that I do a lot of talking about myself. And that's kind of where I'm stuck. I'm between Alex as a wrestler and Alex as a manager, because without having too many people upset, I still want to be the most important person, whether that be with a pen or walking down to the ring. I mean, I don't feel as if I am just someone who's holding one of my athletes' hands while they get in the ring. I'm not that person. I want my role in wrestling to be as important as the actual athletes. The question is how do you do that? And that's what is on the plate in front of me is, okay, if you're going to do something like that, how do you do that? And that's, again, going full circle to and back to the MPWAC. That's where they come into play by being part of an organization. The more of these athletes that I bring on, of course, with the commission's help, the easier it becomes to branch out into get into more areas, eventually representing more athletes, and eventually gaining success and power along with that. This is a much more narrow, longer road, and the difficulty level is much higher. As before, the commission just said, here's your power. You can go ahead and give people citations, fine them, suspend them, and I'm not sure as much as everyone enjoys having that type of control. I still want to be the person that walks down to the ring and is part of the matches and is there with their athlete watching them hopefully win. The other thing is it's a conflict of interest. If you're involved with commission on top of representing athletes, let's say if you're representing athletes on top, you're representing athletes on an event that is also sponsored by the commission, conflict of interest there, because I can't let my own guys get away with things. It gets messy. So I decided instead of doing both, just to do the one.
I got you. Now, the reason why I point that out or ask that is because your character, if you will, sir, and I do mean, and I say this many a time because I try to talk to each person genuinely. I don't try to pull no punches or nothing.
Sure.
Your character is absolutely money. You take charge. You do your job very well. I would not, if I was and I know there's drama, the politics, and from here to there, and I got that. That's life in itself. And I know what happens in wrestling behind the scenes and all of that jazz. I get that. But if I was a promoter of a of a wrestling promotion and anywhere near, I don't care, in any like 4 or 5 different, 6 different states around, Massachusetts area, and I saw Alex Cypher as a character, I would want him on my event. I personally would try to keep the politics, the drama, and all of that dumb stuff, if you will, aside and try to do wrestling. And I would bring you on board like that, my man. And no bullshit, I swear.
Well, I definitely appreciate that. And, to be fair, I don't blame anyone for possibly having that perspective on me. As you're not already representing talent, why do I want you? I don't blame anybody for that. What I also think is the common belief is, I'm another guy in a suit. What are you going to offer me? Just wearing a tie. There's how many of those guys that exist in wrestling? Of course, most of those guys are douches who wear sunglasses indoors as well. But, there's a lot of guys running around like they're businessmen in suits. The difference between me and them is, one, I know what I'm talking about, both on the business side and the wrestling side. And I'm also self-aware. So I know what my role is. I know how I look, and I know how I'm supposed to be perceived, especially when you need to be someone who needs to be respected and be an authority figure. I'm not just a guy in a suit. There's a brain and there's a mouth behind it, and the brain and the mouth can, in fact, make people money, and I'll prove it. I will. Go ahead. Did you have a question? You look like you're gonna compliment me, and I'm gonna let you.
Actually, I am. What you bring to the table, it's not like you said. You wear many hats when you walk through that curtain, when you come out with a microphone. It's not just the commissioner. It's not just this. It's not just that. You wear many hats all at once. And that's what I think really brings your character like out there, because you have to stand out. And especially like you're saying, I'm not just another guy in a suit. I have the mindset to make you elevate as an athlete, to get you over, if you will, to get you over. So I see that just as a fan, and I appreciate that. That's why we latch onto your character and we boo the piss out of you. And I know you love it. I know you do. Look at him smile. Now that's bringing me to a point though. The fans, you obviously hear us, and taking that dance, what I say, the dance between wrestler, fan, and wrestler, that makes that magic happen. You're obviously hearing, you're obviously hearing what we're saying, and not all wrestlers or managers or what have you will address every single comment that they hear. But when they hear something that makes them click, that kind of maybe a little trigger, or you can have fun with it, you totally run with it. And I'm going to give you a perfect example. You have a nickname, and I know I was going to bring this up.
Boy, I actually, after 45 minutes, I thought I was going to get away with it, but yeah.
No way. You have a name, Putz. They call you Putz. It's kind of taken on a life of its own, and I don't. And I want to say, if I'm not you may know, because I think it was started with a dear friend of mine, Eric Hunting. I call him Friend Eric, and he started this Putz thing, and he will even bring he brings signs and passes them out for the fans, so everybody could have a lot of fun.
Oh, so it's him who's handing out the signs to everybody.
Oh shit! I'm sorry, Eric. That is totally my bad. No, I did not say Friend Eric. I meant to say Friend Jim Kulik, because you and Jim Kulik, you can go back and forth. But again, the fans, that that dance that we do, you look like you're having just as much fun, even though you're angry, even though you kind of look peed off a little bit. Isn't that a lot of fun? I mean, you got to say that's some fun, no?
I will say that I believe that deep down inside somewhere that term is possibly a little bit endearing. I don't think anyone will admit that, but I can feel it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have taken on so much of a life of its own. You have to be something that isn't already around. You got to be something different that people haven't seen before. Wrestling is, in fact, a business, one that generates money. I do believe that I can make people money, and part of that is by knowing, basically how to act in certain situations. Both in the real world and the world that we know of. Pro wrestling. So I deal with it.
That's kind of, I thought you would have, Lisa, you might have a little fun with it, because, man, we go back and forth, and holy cow. And you say deep down it might be a word of endearment, if you will, because you and Mr. Tunis tried to turn that around on us, the fans, along with Mr. Bacon, if you will, tried to turn that around on us and saying that it was some term of endearment. I don't think we're throwing out that it's a term of endearment. If that's how you perceive it and you want to try to turn this around, we didn't really latch on to that at all. You guys might have, the three of you, not us.
Well, I like people making noise for me. That part will always be inside of me, being I started as someone who wanted to be cheered as a wrestler. So, I mean, as long as people are making noise at me, I know it was because I was doing a good job. They may not like the job, but I knew it was doing it well.
That's going to be the title of this episode. I name each episode something different.
Okay.
Because I'm going to have to look back, because I'm not that smart. Again, I got to look back, but to the fact of, because I did my job and did it well. Because I did my job well. I think that's what we're going to do right there.
Okay.
Because without bringing that to the table, characters don't stand out in wrestling. They get very kind of blasé. We don't get to have that interaction with every single
Mhm.
man or woman that gets into that ring because we have fun and we do our
Sure.
boos, we do our cheers. But you can tell, like when I'm going home, I'm talking to my dad about, because I bring my dad to all the shows. He loves going. I'll be talking to my dad about what Bacon did, what Hammer did, what Cypher did. And there's standouts from these shows. And not to give any slight by anybody else's performance, but you remember these in the forefront. And then you kind of trickle through the show of what you remember. And then,
Mhm.
we bring up other stuff. But I'm telling you, you are in that forefront of all of those on the road back to home conversations when we as fans start talking. I'm telling you, man, your character is money. I love it. The fans latch onto it. The whole Putz thing is taken on a total life of its own. And
It
me
is what
bringing that
it
up,
is. Mhm.
because though, sometimes we, the fans, we spin your direction where you don't want it to go or didn't expect it to go. So when you come out and you're supposed to be a heel, sometimes we cheer for you, all depending on where you are, what promotion you're at, and vice versa. If you're supposed to be a good guy, sometimes we'll just boo the piss out of you because we like the other guy better. It just happens like that.
I get it.
So
I don't understand
taking
it.
that, yeah. So taking that on a life of its own, your character we have latched on to so much that the whole P word, I won't mention it again, the whole P word is circulating in those couple organizations. I would love to see you just to spread your wings a little bit in other organizations because I know that it would it would keep carrying on because people that know you, they come to those other shows and we can get that whole ball rolling. So spread your wings. Let's get the P word in more places. That would be a lot of fun.
Well, um, it's a backhanded compliment because you kept throwing that P word in there, of course. But
I
one
just
thing
said
I
P.
can tell all the professional wrestlers out there that if I am in your corner, people 100% will be leaving the show talking about us. So I 100% uh, believe that, and I think you believe that too.
I do. No
Even if you
bullshit. I
don't,
swear.
I'm telling you, you do. Believe
the,
you can edit
the
that
pleasure
part.
was all mine. Yeah.
Yes,
The,
it
the,
is. That's what you
it
should
is.
name this episode. Was the pleasure was all yours. Boom.
Bam.
Maybe
There we
the
go.
next one. That'll be for the next one.
Oh man. Now, Mr. Cypher, you kind of took me on a different spin on this one because I thought you were going to be a little gruff, a little abrasive, if you will, because I do the hey Kincaid center ring, blah blah blah, and I'm kind of an idiot. But you're more serious, more professional, more authority driven. I thought this was going to be a bumpy ride, if you will, but you have taken us on a fantastic journey. And I know I probably didn't dive into many, many things that I could, but what I do is I leave a little bit of that mystique because once we get back and things get a rolling, I'm going to have way more questions to ask. This whole thing is going to take a life on its own. Again, I won't say it. And I know that cage match, whatever it is, the fans are gonna we are gonna wait for that. And I'm gonna just put it at this because the nail in the coffin of that storyline, it's a 2-year driven storyline, like you said. But I
That is it.
love those lengthy storylines. I love lengthy title reigns. Me personally, I dig that stuff. What I'd like to ask you is, do you like to see a champion on that platform representing that company for like 365 plus? Or do you like to see the championships kind of go from here to there after a few months so everybody gets a shot at it? How do you perceive that?
I That's a good question. I believe that the regular wrestling feud could benefit from being shorter. Especially with the idea that matches should be more athletic, they should be better contests. They should resemble more real life mixed martial arts type of believability and things along those lines. Um, sorry,
Think
I'm
fast enough.
listening to children dying in the background. Ask me the question one more time, Don, please.
Okay, before I get to the question, your children, you don't seem very concerned that they're dying, sir.
Just because you have children doesn't mean you necessarily like them.
Okay, I can feel that sometimes. Oh God, I hope my daughter didn't hear that. The championship reign, lengthy, short
Yes,
little hot potato kind of thing. Which do you prefer?
I like to talk. Sometimes I forget the point that I'm trying to make. Hot
Oh,
potato.
we know that.
I'm going towards hot potato. Now, I don't necessarily think that, I don't want to see champions lose their championships on a regular basis, but I believe that maybe there should be more fresh faces as far as challengers are lined up for the different champions. Champions become champions for a variety of different reasons. So being able to see what their talent can do against a variety of different opponents, that's something more I would like to see, as opposed to the same, two guys having the same matches for, a few months.
Right.
That's
I,
my
I
that's
can I can definitely feel that on the independent level because when we go to the shows and we see the names on the cards and we see these matches that are built, but when you see those similar ones, it's like, why are those two going against each other again? Kind of thing. Not in all promotions. It's
sure.
sprinkled in here and there, it's wrestling. Uh, those kind of things, they tweak me a little bit because of the length that some of them do run them. But you guys in the storylines, you mix it up because Scotty Wild's the champion at WMW and stuff like that, and you're
Yeah.
using that, which is really cool. Now, Big Bacon, he's coming back from the whole injury thing, feeling good, getting back in the ring. I love seeing Big Bacon, the closers right off the ripper. When I was at PvP, big fans, giant fans, latch right on to both of them. Um, Big Bacon, you're one of your clients, if you will. You represent Big Bacon. That guy, and I don't know why, he should already be on TV. I know he got injured. He was at a
He should.
Beyond show against Chuck O'Neal. Uh, he should be on TV by now. I would have to say that you would agree with that, yeah?
100%. I have had the pleasure of wrestling him in the past, before I was obviously in this role, and I knew from then that he was special. I mean, this is someone who has to make things harder for himself in the ring to challenge himself. For instance, now he's doing some like blindsided no look power bomb, that he's grabbing people while they're walking backwards into him from the side. I mean, the level of difficulty on that is like level 11, and he's doing that stuff just to make things a challenge for him. I think he's an incredible performer and athlete, and it's definitely just a matter of time, injury or not, once he's back at 100% and on TV, once the world becomes somewhat normal again.
Mm-hmm.
It was a hiccup in the road, but it just shows the resilience of him. I mean, same thing with Hammer, with Hammer Tunis. They within the same week injured themselves in the same exact way, and they both come back before their timeline had suggested. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's things will continue to look up for both of them. But in the meantime, Bacon has already come back and made a lot of noise in doing so.
And now I bring up Mr. Bacon because he's been hitting those bigger plateaus, if you will, the Northeast Wrestling, the Beyond Wrestling, and that just means he's right there, sir. He is right there from just those right eyes to see him, to pick him up, maybe do that NXT run and get him in that performance. And that's what I'm feeling from Big Bacon. But my point being about Big Bacon is he always comes home. Home is home. You don't forget where you come from. And I love that about him. You see him at all the PvP stuff all the time, the WMW stuff now. That bringing it home, though, that's part of, I feel, as a fan, now that I've learned a little bit more of the business, just a little bit. I'm not one of those smart ass wrestlers that think they know everything, because there's no fan that I think I call myself a wrestler. Holy shit. There is no fan that knows it all. That's for damn sure. And I'm not one of those guys. But as I learned a little bit, I know that Big Bacon is just on that cusp and coming back home. And the boys and girls that see him do these cool things and come back home, that's got to make everybody back home feel awesome because he doesn't forget us, kind of thing. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. He's, to be fair, one of many athletes that we have that, have been recognized in television recently or in some of these bigger promotions in other parts of the country. That's, in my opinion, one of the reasons why PvP has grown so much in the past 2 years. Not necessarily because of what I've done, but what, the talent there has done. We've brought people in from, all the best promotions in Massachusetts and then some. We have athletes from Chaotic. We have athletes from Top Rope. We have athletes from, Test of Strength as well as Creative Pro all the way down in Jersey. We have Chris Benet and Logan Black from New York. I mean, we have wrestlers from all over. And I really think that's what has really elevated, PvP over the past 2 years is guys like Bacon and, guys like the Logan Blacks and the Chris Benets that have come over that weren't a regular part of the roster, 4 or 5 years ago, and now they're here making a massive difference and contributing a ton. And as long as we have that formula and people do like working there, because I promise you, my athletes do in fact like working there. I think that in hindsight, they'll always come back as long as they're available. I don't fault anybody for doing something that betters themselves, but I feel like as long as they're available, my athletes will always come home.
Mr. Cypher, this has been a pleasure. Again, I was expecting a little of a abrasive side of you.
I'm sure it has been a pleasure for you, Don. I'm sure it has been.
Yeah, it was kind of a mind F, if you will, because I was expecting maybe some yelling a little bit. I want to thank you for something, though. You
Sure.
came in, I do this little fan roundtable, and we have like 6, 7, 8 fans. We kind of hang out, and I like to bring in surprise guests, and I never tell anybody that's on the panel, if you will. I never tell them in our group chat. I always make it a surprise. That's why we call it surprise guests. You came in, and you were fabulous, man. You did your thing, and we had a lot of fun. Do you like doing those little, like this stuff? Do you like doing this kind of stuff?
I haven't done a lot of this type of stuff before. That's kind of the difference between then and now is I passed up opportunities to even do, sit down chats like this. And I have realized that there isn't going to be much forward movement unless I start branching out and doing things out of my comfort zone. I like giving back the same garbage that they give me. So I've got no problem if people want to be rude to me and make fun of me and put me down. I will do the same. What's the golden rule? Only do unto others that you would do to yourself. Or it's been a while, but something along those lines, missing a word or two. But that's my answer. I'm sticking with it.
Hey, that was a fine answer. There's nothing wrong with that. Hey, that's your answer. I can't argue with that. Mr. Cypher, again, an absolute pleasure. I have a full night ahead of me. I have 2 more interviews today. So we try to squeeze them in a little bit. I know we've been running an hour 3. I didn't even think you were going to stomach me for about 15 minutes. Holy crap.
I have a reputation that I didn't want to bring necessarily to this interview because I wouldn't have agreed with to it if I wasn't going to actually participate in it. So people are like, why is he being understanding? Because I am understanding. It's fools that make me angry.
Well, I'm a fool, and I'm glad I didn't make you angry. But before I let you go, how do the new fans that don't know you, or even the fans that do know you that might not have found your commission, if you will, how do we find that stuff?
Get back in your cage!
Sorry, go ahead.
Social media stuff. Could you give could you give the fans some social media stuff? I don't know if we want to find you now. The Alex Cypher, the commission, and all of that good stuff.
At NPWAC. Twitter, Facebook. I'm Pro Wrestling Commission on Instagram.
Okay. Well, this is this is stirring the pot with Don Kincaid. I'm very concerned for the children. I'm not going to call, the authorities because, not my biz. I stay out of biz like that. This is stirring the pot with Don Kincaid. And I'm going to add two specials. My my very special guest, one Alex Cypher. Thank you so much for coming in, talking with the fans. I appreciate it, sir.
You're welcome.
Oh, what the hell?